Hello, I'm Jim Cornwall, and this is the WalkingPost.com podcast. WalkingPost.com is the news website dedicated to walking, with or without poles, with all the latest on trails, festivals, gear, books, and more. This podcast is airing on Friday, April the 11th. Amazingly, still no rain, although sadly there have been several forest fires locally, the closest one between 10 and 15 miles away. It's very frightening, and the first thing I always think about is the effect on wildlife and habitat. It was also an interesting week insofar as it's the school Easter holidays here, so we took advantage of the nice weather to go and do some filming, only for my son to slide down a leafy bank and turn his ankle, so that didn't last long. We also had a clog in our outside drain, and by clog I don't mean a shoe, so more expense. The only good news was that I found an old hard drive when I was looking for a file and discovered about a dozen songs I'd written about 10 years ago, so I worked on them a little bit, which was fun. I remembered a couple of them, but with the others it was like finding an album by someone else. Last week on the podcast we talked with the IML Walking Association and about the March. Both very enjoyable conversations, as are this week's. I did have a few to choose from, which is always a good thing, and we're going to go with the Talgarth Walking Festival and the xTx Trail being planned for Texas. It's a big trail and a slightly longer interview, but worthwhile, I promise. Feel free to reach out with news, guest ideas and comments via walkingpost.com, or you can just email me directly at jim@walkingpost.com. As always, before we get to the interviews, let's take a quick look at some of the headlines of the news articles we had on walkingpost.com this week. There is a new range of Cliff Bars, the caffeinated collection, just what I need on a hike. Ordnance Survey has published 10 new short walks books, which look interesting, and according to some research, good old-fashioned pedometers are more than good enough to measure health activity. I remember my mum got a pedometer once because she walked everywhere and was interested in knowing how far she walked, and she put it on her leg and promptly lost it the first time she used it. Ursula Martin has a new book called One Woman Walks Europe. Bluetti has partnered with Leave No Trace on Power Sustainable Outdoor Adventures. Kelty has 3 new Red Wing Traveller backpacks, and there are some new hiking trails being planned for the coastline on the Greek island of Crete. Suffolk has announced free walking and cycling activities, and you can read all of those articles and more at walkingpost.com. Okay, time for this week's interviews. We like to feature some of the walking festivals here on the podcast because it's a great way to discover new places, make new friends and go walking. And this week we're off to Wales, to that beautiful region close to the border with England. There you'll find the town of Talgarth, which has its own walking festival, and that takes place from the 2nd to the 5th of May. To tell us about the event is Havard Prosser, chair of the Talgarth Walkers Are Welcome group. All right, thanks for joining us today. Could you maybe set the scene a little and tell us exactly where Talgarth is?
Yeah, certainly. Talgarth is in the eastern part of the Brecon Beacons National Park, or Banau Brycheiniog. Well, Talgarth itself is at the north end of the Black Mountains. If you look at Banau Brycheiniog in total, you have the western limestone area and something called the Black Mountain in singular, which is the Carmarthen Vans and the whole sort of waterfalls area. And then you have the central beacons, which is Pennyvan and Cornsey, which is a very popular area. And then we have the Black Mountains, which is the area that fringes really the Welsh-English border. an area not quite so frequented, but over the past few years since the COVID epidemic, it has become a more popular area for walking. It consists of a number of bridges which run north-south with sort of valleys, so it's ideal for walking the ridges.
Of course, there's a walking festival there. I wonder if you could explain a little bit about the walking festival's history, when it started and how it's changed over the years.
Yes, certainly. The first festival was organised in 2013. It came out of an initiative by Talgarth Town Council to set up a Talgarth Walkers a Welcome group. They had been to a number of locations around which had already set up Walkers a Welcome groups in towns, particularly Winchcombe in Gloucestershire and Ross. And I think they thought that it would have benefits for the area. So out of the accreditation, if you like, of Talgarth as a Walkers a Welcome town, they developed really the whole idea of having a walking festival. I think we ran about 10 events over the weekend. We sort of got ourselves fixed into running the festival over the 3 days of the early May bank holiday. So that's sort of become the fixture. You probably have heard also of the Talgarth Walking Festival, which predated us, but that set up a few years before us and has proved to be quite a successful model on which to base our festival itself.
The current version, how much bigger is it than the first one?
We've still retained the sort of 3-day event over the May bank holiday, and it's expanded now to around about 30 events over the 3 days. It starts with a sort of opening event on the Friday evening. Sometimes it's to do with local archaeology or local geology or nature facilities. This year we're having a presentation on the Dark Skies project, which is quite prominent in the fact that we're not got many towns and not many lights. So it's a perfect area for looking at the skies, provided we have a cloudless time. It starts with that. We then, I say, have run about 10 events per day, and those range from fairly serious walks. This year we have arrangements to do 3 sections of Offa's Dyke path from near Abergavenny up to Hay, and then from Hay to Kington, and then from Kington to Knighton. That's probably the hardest walks. They're graded in our description on the website. And then the range of other walks that we have, what we are trying to do is to tell stories about the area. So, we will have a geologist who will walk through an area and talk about, the effects of the Ice Age on the area. We'll have nature walks to describe some of the sort of features and wildlife, etc., in the area. Others on the history of the area. So it's really, rather than just giving people an opportunity just to do a walk, the whole idea is to actually sort of construct that around stories about the area.
I guess people can just go for walks on their own. It's nice to add that little bit extra so that it's more value to the walk.
Indeed, and our leaders are volunteers, but they tend to be experts in a particular area, so they are able to really help in describing the local features to our visitors.
In terms of the number of visitors, do you get a lot of people from outside of the area, or are you able to tell?
It's quite difficult to tell, but I think it's probably 2/3 of people are within 30 miles of the area. And then we get a wider range of people from areas of England, Bristol, London area. So it's a bit of a mix, really. I suppose we have round about 300 or 400 participants. And then it's a question that some of those may only do one walk and others may do a series of walks.
You mentioned the Offa's Dyke, and that's quite strenuous. Are there also walks that children and dogs are allowed on?
We have run children's events in the past. We haven't, frankly, been very successful. I think it depends on if we have a nice summer's day, it's fine. But if it's the last event it turned out to be held, and we had a thunderstorm, so it was a bit difficult. We have a particular policy on dogs, which is to say, no dogs. It's a ground bird nesting time.
Right. And are there costs associated with doing the walks?
Yes, the costs range from £10 for the higher grade walks down to about £5 for the lower grade walks. So, for instance, the Offa Dyke path, we actually have to also include an additional supplement for a minibus. One of the things that we also try to do is linear walks as opposed to circular walks, but that means that we actually have to use a minibus, and that's an additional charge.
And people can book in advance on the website, I assume?
Yes, this year the bookings opened on the beginning of February, and the bookings can be made on that website until the day of the festival.
And for those people that aren't from the area, if they're coming from a further distance than just commuting range, is accommodation easy to find?
There's a fair range of accommodation, self-catering, and there's some hotel accommodation. Most of that we don't directly deal with, but there's a Brecon Beacons tourism organisation, and there's a local Talgarth information centre.
Do you have to change the walks up every year to keep them fresh, or do you keep them similar each year?
We try to have a mix. We aim really for about half the walks to be new. And sometimes you have a really novel walk. So this year, a group of artists in the area came forward with an idea to have a walk, but visited 3 artist studios. So that's a new walk for us that we're arranging. And then there's a new cafe at Talgarth Mill that's been set up. So we're having a sort of soiree there, and it will include a book launch of a book that's just been written on the local rivers, because the River Wye is obviously these days a very contentious issue in terms of its pollution. So this book has been written to partly support that campaign.
I think I'm definitely more at home with festivals around the size of the Talgarth event, and it's definitely a beautiful part of Wales. Actually, most places in Wales are. I remember my first trip to Wales was a field trip at university to study seaweed in Anglesey, and of course we managed to get caught by the tide. And North Wales was where I saw some anti-English graffiti on a wall that said English pigs go home, only the capital G wasn't quite completed, so it looked like English pies go home. I always wondered what flavour. Having said that, the people that we met there couldn't have been any friendlier. We stayed at a bed and breakfast, and the host was one of the nicest men I've ever met. Every day he'd make sandwiches for us, which wasn't part of the deal. Alright, now let's cross the ocean from Wales to the rather large state of Texas. I've been there a few times, but it's so big and diverse it would take years to see all that it has to offer. But one thing the state has lacked is a long-distance trail. But it would appear not for much longer, as a group led by Charlie Gandy is planning to create the xTx Trail from the Louisiana border right across to the west part of the state in El Paso. It will make for a great place to hike in the winter, with the northern part of the country usually suffering from snow and very cold temperatures. So, to tell us about the story so far is Charlie Gandy. I think that there are a lot of people in the UK and Europe looking for new experiences. So I thought, it would be great to talk about a potential new trail. So maybe attract some people to Texas, obviously not in July, but
having traveled myself quite a bit and lived mostly in states in the U.S. West all my life, including Texas. And I'm a hiker and I'm a mountaineer. And so after having put thousands of miles on trails and climbed lots of big mountains and such, I realized last July that the magic of a Appalachian Trail or the magic of a Pacific Crest Trail was missing in Texas. And being a fifth generation Texan, a guy who, for various reasons, has gotten around that state all of my life, even not living there on a regular basis. I could see that I could play the role of the bridge between the hiking community and the adventure community and real Texans and people who had a stake in their place and deep down have a generosity that's sometimes skewed, but they have a generosity for, and I'm talking about rural people in Texas. They have a generosity for others who are out there making their own way. They have a respect for that. And I could see where I might be the a nexus between Texas and the sweet parts of Texas and knowing the value of the long distance hike on a trail such as that. And so I had this insight last June on the Tahoe Rim Trail in Northern California. I'd gotten to the end of this roughly 10-day hike and was wondering what I was going to do next. And it occurred to me that in the wintertime, the only long distance hike in the United States has been the Florida Trail. And so I could see where there's a missing in the US for another winter trail. I could see from my own experiences with climate change and wildfires back out west and hurricanes back east and the lottery system set up for the Pacific Crest Trail. I could see where these trails were being overwhelmed with interest. There's a lot of people out there, as you described, that are looking for the experiential vacation as opposed to going to a place that looks a lot like their place and not really learning anything new about a different culture. So I can see where this was a possibility. And I spent last summer working electronically on a route from Louisiana to New Mexico through the heart of the state, knowing where a lot of those gems were, just my experience. I'm a native Texan. I went to the University of Texas. I graduated in 1980. I started working in the political world, and make a long story short, I got elected to serve in the Texas legislature when I was 23 years old. And I got to know a lot about Texas politics in my 20s. And I made a network of people across the state that I could tap into. And so 40 years later, I've come back and am tapping into that network of friends and family and others that live along this target-rich route. I am looking at this from the perspective of a hiker, both a through hiker and a local hiker. And so I've created a trail that is a combination of back roads and dirt roads and wide shoulders on county roads and private land and state parks and national parks, more private land that is a circuitous route through East Texas, the timber country, where you have these canyons of trees that you're walking through the hill country where water comes out of rocks and it's crystal clear and ready to drink and it's cold. And I was shocked that that kind of Colorado experience even existed in Texas when I went to school down there in the late 70s. And then out west, you have the Chihuahuan Desert, you have Big Bend National Park, this is 1,500 miles across Texas. And the last 750 miles, it is a tough place, and it's not ready yet for hikers or people on horses or people mountain biking, because we haven't worked out all of the water at a rate that one could carry, most humans could carry in a day. So we're on our 8th month now. We went public with this in September. Texas Monthly and a couple of TV stations picked up on it immediately. That gave us a avalanche of publicity, and our website fortunately was set up to receive and handle this. People started sending us money. The legacy concept for Texans is very real. People want to participate in something that's tangible, that they know has value on a bunch of different levels, and something that they can honor a relative or their family and so we quickly raised 1.5 times the amount of money that we thought we needed to raise for just the organizing effort. We have now some 2,000 people on our newsletter list, and we've got about 400 people identified to do various volunteer activities. And in September, in making that original tour, I was able to check in with people I know across the state that I was going to be depending on to help me with local connections to talk about this trail going across ranches and such. Got a good response from them. I was surprised. The stereotypes of ranchers saying hell no still exists, and there are still plenty of people out there that aren't ready to do this yet. But there's been plenty of wealthy people, non-Americans, and Americans that have traveled places and have come back to Texas that aren't afraid of having sojourners and pilgrims and athletes and people on horses going across their property. In the last 6 months, my wife and I and our team has been doing little other than responding to property owners that want this trail to go across their ranch. Some of them more insistent about it than others. I've got an hour's worth of stories about ranchers that said, "Hey, that black line looks like it's going across my place. Let me show you a better way, and I want to be a part of this." We have another set of people, and I have a half a dozen of them right now. We've got in touch with some, but I have a half a dozen that I need to get back to who want to buy property along this route. And they're saying essentially, as soon as you get that firmed up, let us know because we want to participate in this trail by buying property on it and being a trailhead, being a trail angel, supporting the people who are doing it. We have one couple that have already bought 35 acres out in Medina, which is out in the hill country, because they're horse people, because they believe in this project and they want to be a part of it. And so their ranch will be basically a place where horse people, it's a trailhead. People can offload their and leave their trailers on their place and take off from there going east or west. And then, of course, the hiking, biking, and horse communities that see this trail as something that they want to participate in, either as a founder and as a ground proofer and as an advisor on the project, or as a consumer of it. And so they're looking at what we're talking about these ghost towns and small towns in East Texas with rich histories. And, the settlers went there, and we basically have an east to west orientation on the trail because of tailwinds, and those of us that ride bikes like tailwinds. And then it goes into the hill country. It goes through some cool small towns, LaGrange, ZZ Top made famous, Smithville, where there's a bunch of the people who write songs and don't want to live in Austin, move out to Smithville. Some of the best barbecue you've ever had, and Bluebell ice cream in the hill country. It's a cultural experience. It's a trail that, just like the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail or any other trail that's ever been developed, we have started with what is available. I've been across the state now 3.5 times in a van. I've also been on my bike a lot, and I've hiked the first 100 miles of the trail from the Louisiana border. In the ground proofing process, we have found where the lines on our maps, our electronic lines on our maps, are actually now gated and not available to us. So we've had to do lots of workarounds through the fall and winter months of this year. And then we did, starting in March, we did the first 100 miles. We call it the sweaty taste of the xTx, where we sent a crew out on horses, another crew out on bikes, and another crew of us, about 8 of us, hiking. And we did 20-mile days testing that first 100 miles from gator-infested Sabine River to Quicksand Creek to Lake Livingston. I bring up gators and quicksand because those really aren't the issues. They're fun to talk about, but it's the dogs coming out that want to bark at you, and 1 out of 10 want to bite you. I have learned that I carry a small lipstick size pepper spray, and I actually had to use it on this last run, and I was shocked at how effective it was. 3 dogs coming, the lead dog, I missed him the first time. I got him the second time. He whipped around and took off. And so I admit I'm a little trigger happy now, and I'm ready to take on whatever comes at me. And the joke is that they're ineffective on gators because the gators are Cajun, and so they open their mouths because they like the pepper spray.
And you probably don't have to worry about armadillos either.
They're friendly. Armadillos are fine. Leave the skunks alone. This time of year, the snakes aren't out, and so life's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine you were mentioning about the properties and stuff, though. It's probably there's probably good economics involved, because if you put, glamping or tents or huts on your property, you could rent those out.
Yeah, what we have, and I just mentioned what we've been doing, which is harvesting the goodwill and of the people who actually want to do this, and in fact, some cases spend their own money to do it. The next group of people will be, once we have our route identified and we know where we need to and want to improve it, we'll be going and talking to those property owners, and we'll talk to them about allowing us to do this out of the goodness of their heart. But if they need to see a business proposition, yes. For those people who, right now, you should know that the cattle business out in West Texas is part of our history, but it's not part of our future because of climate change and so forth. People aren't making any money on cows these days, but they've got the infrastructure in place to water those cows back up in those canyons and so forth. Some of them, the only income they have is off of hunting, which will bring in most cases, people will say 20 to 50,000 bucks a year. Which is fine until you learn that a 1 mile of fence costs $20,000 and to dig a new well costs $35,000. And so the expenses related to this go beyond hunting. And so our proposition is those same cabins that you're renting to those hunters can be rented to hikers after hunting season, which is when the hiking season actually is out here in January, February, March. And in some cases, they have property that has waterfalls, springs, hot and cold, petroglyphs, and sinkholes and caves and places people would they're like miniature state parks. And some of these big ranches around here, 96% of the land in Texas is privately owned. And so what we're doing is tapping into a route that can migrate on or off of those ranches when we have deals with them. So basically, instead of dealing with a bunch of public agencies that have 10-year planning processes before we could even start putting anybody on a horse across there, I'm dealing with about 100 dictators that own their ranches that get to make decisions completely independent of anybody else. That's okay, because in some cases, hikers are willing to pay $100 a night for that cabin, and that's attractive to that guy. If you've got a waterfall that is the second highest waterfall in the state, and in other places would be a state park, people will pay $30 a night to camp there. And I honestly haven't gone deep into that conversation with them yet, but I have a waiting list of people to talk to about it.
Do you need to talk to anybody at like the state level or about going across national parks, anything like that?
We have, and we're going adjacent to or through 17 state parks across the route and 3 national parks, actually 2 national parks and a preserve. And so, yeah, we're talking to all of those, but it's important to know that we're basically coming in as any other visitor using the same facilities under the same rules. And so we're not asking for any special privileges. There are places where we could change their policy and make it more convenient for us, for instance, to hike in this way and go out that way versus having to go in and out the same way, or do it in hours that aren't 8 to 5:30 in the afternoon, and setting up so that other states have, for instance, guaranteed campsites for people showing up either on a horse or hiking or a mountain bike. And so they're not stranded by a campground that's filled up with people in RVs. There'll be conversations like that, but the national park, Big Bend National Park, allows horses, hikers, and bikers on any of the four-wheel drive roads and such. And the Big Bend State Park, they have easier rules than the national park has. So yeah, that is part of our early conversation, and the good news is that there aren't any real issues there.
It's you said, how long is it going to be in terms of distance?
1,550 miles with an overall elevation gain of 56,000 feet.
But I guess when a lot of people think about Texas, they don't realize just how diverse it is.
It is. I believe there's 11 ecosystems across the state. It's a big place. From zero elevation at the Gulf Coast, which is basically we're starting just upstream from that, all the way out to the highest peak in the state, Guadalupe Peak out in West Texas. This is the pretty part of Texas, by the way. I purposely haven't taken it through any of the skanky parts of Texas because that's not what I want to show people. I want to show people remote Texas. I want to show them untamed Texas. I want to show them what's rural, remote, rugged, and therefore irresistibly romantic. Purposely, I'm going through some small towns because there aren't places around them and they're resupply places. But we're not going through any big cities, and we're going adjacent to a bunch of them, and it will, just like these other trails, there will be trails built to reach this spine trail over the years. It's a legacy project, and we're still in our first year of it. Pacific Crest Trail doesn't have an absolute number on its mileage because that changes every year due to floods, fires, rock falls, property changes, and so forth. The lines move, and sometimes they move to improve the route. Sometimes they're forced to go around something that's changed. Same thing's going to happen here. We get to be the catalyst. We get to be the ones who recognize the opportunity. And let me tell you something, Jim. This groundproofing exercise that we're getting to do right now is, for me as a veteran hiker and as somebody who likes to show people new things that I have found. Out in West Texas in Big Bend National Park, we have a hidden gem called the Santa Lena Canyon. It is a remote, rugged route where in some cases the canyon walls are about 50 feet wide, yet they go up 1,500 feet, and it winds around for about 8 miles, the canyon itself. It's never been accessible in human history due to water flows coming down. It's been a place where people have tested themselves against the rock slide and other features of the canyon that'll dump you out if you don't know what you're doing. But it's always been wet, and it's always been extraordinary. I've done it 3 times in canoes, and it's an extraordinary experience, always. But because of upstream irrigation demands, because of climate change, and because of a drought now that we're in about probably year 3 or 4 out there, the river is a trickle. And I'm saying that not exaggerating. There are pools of water, but between them is water running at less than 5 cubic feet per second, meaning it's a trickle. There hadn't been a canoe or a kayak through there in at least 3 years. And so it's opening up, it's changing until the rain comes back, if it does. And even that's not going to bring back, I don't think, without, because of the other issues, upstream irrigation demands is the big one. Most of the water flowing into the Rio Grande there is coming from Mexico. And those farmers have a treaty with the U.S. that is rarely enforced and recognized, and therefore there's a pitiful amount of water that comes into the Santa Lena Canyon to begin with these days. Pile on those other two, climate change and drought, and you got a great place to hike. In some cases, you have to swim through it. In some cases, it's knee-deep mud. So it's still an adventure, but you're doing it as a hiker, not as a paddler. And so we're getting to recognize a new route through Santa Lena Canyon that is a much more attractive route for a hiker with skills to go through than the xTx route that we have now, which basically follows the river road around Big Bend and then up to Terralingua and Lajitas. So we're getting to explore this, and I got to take a writer for Texas Monthly out there last week. She's writing a story about it. It will be kind of a big deal around here because, again, it's one of those hidden gems. This is a geological cathedral out in the desert. It is flat and dry except for this place. And so this is a wet route. This is a wet hiking route that actually, on the route that we've identified, it's 8, 12, roughly 15 miles from the mouth of Santa Lena Canyon in the national park to the town of Lajitas, which is a jumping off point for the state park. An excellent hike, one that we found no footprints up above the rock slide. And so if we have adventurers out there that want to test themselves against a rugged canyoneering experience in the desert. Santa Lena Canyon is on it. So that's the point. What we're getting to do by looking at this adventure route is looking at the public routes that we have now and how can we improve those. And we're in that phase, and that's frankly what I'll be doing all summer because it's too hot to hike this thing or anything else. But I will be looking at Santa Lena Canyon type alternatives because most of those are on private property. And I'll be talking to those property owners and saying, how can we make this worth it to you and to us? And seeing if we can cut a deal with them so that we can do this kind of hidden gem experience along the xTx.
I think one of the good things about the hiking community is that they're not the kind of people, or at least you hope they're not the kind of people that are going to go into these places on ranchers' land and destroy it. They're going to be pretty respectful.
You're right, and I have evidence. 3 years ago, I hiked the Arizona Trail, which is on the other side of the Chihuahuan Desert, and the majority of that trail is across private ranches. And so I've gone to school on the Colorado Trail and the Arizona Trail in recognizing not only how do you get water, sustainable water out in the desert for hikers, but also how do you manage relationships with property owners. Liability is one issue, and then respect is the other one. And what you just described is in my opinion, it's a way that people show respect anywhere. Hikers have a good reputation for being good stewards of the trail and not leaving behind anything but footprints. As you know, there are exceptions to that, but most of the people I hang out with, their conscience won't allow them to not pick up that candy wrapper that's laying on the trail. And frankly, back to the xTx, one of the things we learned in doing that first 100 miles out in East Texas is one of the ways we're going to be able to deploy the volunteer excitement about the xTx is these routes that we're finding are back roads. And in the wintertime, after they've been mowed, you can see the trash along the routes, particularly as you start coming into these small towns. We're going to have a lot of people who are interested in helping us clean up those routes in and out of those towns, which is good for us and future hikers in terms of the experience. But more importantly, it's going to show that we respect that town and we want to be respectful members of that community as trail angels and trail organizers as well as users. But by putting a spotlight on this route, and we've got plenty of Eagle Scouts that want to help us build watering holes and shelters and help us clean up routes such as this, that for me, that's sustainable. That's who we want to be. And I'm so excited that people are joining us for the right reasons. You know, Jim, that's the thing. Again, they know the value of this that's had in their life or in their family's life, and they want to return the hospitality.
What kind of time frame are you looking at?
Well, we'll be using Far Out as the app that for electronic navigation along the entire route. Next fall, let's call it the next hiking season in Texas, which is basically November, December, January, February, March. We'll be doing some more ground proofing between now and then. The horse people that we had 4 women on horses 2 weeks ago out in East Texas, and these are led by a retired veterinarian, and these are real horse athletes. One of them has done a Mongolian horse ultra marathon 3 times, and so they truly know what they're doing. And they gave us such a solid perspective from a horse perspective on that hike we did the first 100 miles. And so we're talking to them next week about doing 100 miles out in the hill country next fall. Now, once we have got a working route, we're talking to the property owners and the ranchers that we know along the way. We'll be able to come up with some sweet spots, 100-mile segments or less, where it's ideal for mountain biking, it's ideal for hikers, and or it's ideal for horse people. By the way, this is Texas. The horse community is the most enthusiastic of all 3 of our user groups. With 96% of the land privately owned, there aren't that many places to do a public ride. And in the parks, basically, you're going in circles. They are very excited about the romance of the cross-country ride. And so they're full participants in this. And I'm learning as an organizer to lead with the horses. Out in rural Texas, I start with horses and then I say hikers and I mumble mountain bikers. And they didn't hear anything beyond horses. They said, look, we're horse people. We want to support them. What do you need?
Is it going to turn into, like the Appalachian Trail, where it's a big organization that has to run it with lots of staff and volunteers, or how is it going to run?
Maybe, but here there's no question that there'll be a sustainable organization created to manage the conversations that we've been having ongoing. I'm not sure how big it's going to be or needs to be, because this is going to remain a rough trail. We're not trying to pave anything. If it's good enough for horses, it's good enough for mountain bikes and hikers. And so there will be towns along the way, and we'll be encouraging them to look at the xTx that comes in and out of their place or adjacent to their place, their town, and they'll be able to get grants from the state to do trail projects, some of them for disabled people, some of them for just day hikers going in and out of their town. And so we'll encourage that as local hiking, and we'll be setting up youth hostels along the way, maybe about every 100 miles, because one of the things Texas is rich in these small towns are churches. And some of those churches aren't financially viable anymore. And so as a nonprofit organization, we can buy a church, turn that into a youth hostel. So we'll be taking advantage of that and creating that so that we've got, say, 10 to 15 trailheads that people could go to and take off on the trail from there. So instead of a through hike, it would accommodate section hikers and local hikers. So that, that'll require an infrastructure to get up and maintain. For the most part, this is not going to require a lot, or we're not looking for a lot of government money for this. We have so much enthusiasm from the Texas community that is interested in this, that and many of them are wealthy and are saying, just tell us what you need to buy and we can help you. I have a home builder who wants to remain anonymous in Dallas. In October, sent me a text that said, hey, I love what you're doing. I am wealthy and I want to talk to you about your trail. Call me now. Within a half an hour, we had a Zoom call with him and one of his assistants, and learned that, this guy comes at it from the same perspective we do. He knows the value of this kind of trail. I didn't have to convince him about anything. I guess he learned that we were fairly competent in this. He wrote us a $20,000 check and has said, I know I've got friends in Dallas that I want to hit up on this thing too. So you just let me know when it's time to pull them together. As an organizer, that's the kind of energy that is around this trail that keeps me and everybody else enthused about it and recognizing that maybe we're on the right track. And in our generation, what has happened is the whole concept of trail angels has evolved into something that's quite beautiful. But having hiked the Arizona Trail, as I mentioned, every one of the small towns that are along the Arizona Trail take pride in pulling hikers off and taking care of them for a night or two and then putting them back on the trail. There are people there that will come pick you up in their truck and take you into their house and feed you and charge you $20 to get a bed, laundry, dinner, fun, and then out the door the next day. That's the sort of infrastructure that's being set up to support hikers along a trail such as this. Our job is to harvest all that. Our job is to orchestrate that so that it comes together and makes the hiker experience a memorable thing. It certainly has for me. And so, yeah, we've gone to school on that, and that's the sort of thing we're looking to support on the xTx.
I remember hearing about Texas as a kid, including the song by Chris Rea, never dreaming that I'd go there, and I'm certain that the xTx Trail is going to be massively successful, and I have no doubt whatsoever there will be books written about it, much like there are on the Pacific Crest Trail and the Appalachian, and plenty of adventures, so we'll definitely keep looking out for new developments on that one, and hopefully more interviews. I see the weather is going to change here this weekend, which hopefully puts out all the forest fires. Of course, it won't know when to stop, and then we'll get floods. Next week's interviews are done but not edited, and they are interviews about a new adventure trail in Hong Kong and a book launch. And of course all of this week's news, assuming that there is some. So we will be back next week. I hope you enjoyed this week's walkingpost.com podcast, and I hope you have a great week, hopefully with a walk involved. And until next time, happy trails! Walking Post from walkingpost.com is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.